This video has to do with the use of a limited palette. Limited palette can be 1, 2, 3, 4 different colors, but it's, as described, limited to something less than a full spectrum of colors. You just saw a slide of the brushes I use. They're nothing special. And you saw a picture of the colors, burnt umber on the bottom, alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, and white to help with the value adjustments. The first part of this demo is just using one color. This would be a monotone. That's about as limited a palette as you can get. I don't believe initially I even used any white. Notice that I'm working expressively from big shapes and eventually to the smaller shapes. The brushes I'm using were really nothing special. I just grabbed a couple out of the box. You don't have to have pristine brushes. We'll talk about those at another time. But generally speaking, use a brush that's too big for the job. You will not get mired down in the details of the painting if you start with a big brush. At this point in the painting, you shouldn't worry about making mistakes. Never worry about mistakes, especially early on, because they can be corrected pretty easily. If you start with a accurate drawing, um, the painting will be accurate in its shape and placement of objects. Another reason not to worry about mistakes is if I put down an area that I really found offensive, I could get some paper towels out and eradicate that area. Basically erase it just as you would erasing on a piece of paper. Yeah, there's probably a greater degree of inaccuracy right now than accuracy, but I'm getting landmarks down, uh, getting general shapes, getting a feel for the drawing, for the painting, and applying one color. Again, this is monochromatic. Mono meaning one color. In a few seconds, we'll add some more, or a second color. Still limited palette, just two colors, right? The color that I am adding right now is a yellow ochre, and this yellow ochre can be adjusted to look lighter by adding some titanium white. Right here I'm applying pretty much just one color, blending in. When you're making your brush strokes, it's a good idea not to paint by numbers, not to paint right up to the line, but to paint over the line where the colors meet. I'm beginning to add more white to the yellow ochre, and you can see how the value difference is really starting to recess those browns to the background, and it's really bringing the highlights of the yellow ochre forward. And as you progress, if you just stay the course, big objects to small objects, keeping your proportions right, making your comparisons, the painting comes around. I no longer try and start out with the most accurate painting as possible. There's a part of a painting that's called the drawing phase. It's in the beginning. And if you get a good drawing down, which requires a different set of skills and criteria than a finished painting does, the finishing marks on a painting, then you will have done the proper job for the proper moment. Uh, you just have to have faith, stay the course, follow the protocol, and you'll see that given time, it does come around. It always does. May not mean it's a good painting, but you will get some accuracy. A limited palette only means it has a limited number of colors in it. Whatever the colors are is really up to you. There are colors that seem to make sense, that are harmonious because they may be near each other on the color wheel, or your desired effect may be warm and cool colors, so you choose your colors based on that. We have talked ever so slightly about the Zorn, Zorn palette, and that's just a three color, actually, it's white, black, yellow ochre, vermilion, and that's it. Uh, and with those colors, you can get an incredible, nice variety of colors that work well with flesh tones. If you're working nothing but landscapes, your limited palette may be made up of different colors than those I just listed. But limited simply means limited in number. You can make some very nice paintings with just one color, monochromatic. Adding white helps a lot, but even the thick and thin treatment of the pigment of one color can be very effective. As many of you may know, I work from a monitor, a television monitor that I put pictures on, and I paint from that. Um, it's the way I do it. It's convenient. I can paint whether it's 30 degrees below zero out. Um, Regardless of the conditions outside, I can always go inside and paint. A lot of painters think it's more honest, it's more true to draw paint from life. Uh, I would rather paint from life, but there are some times that it's just not possible. So this is how I paint using a monitor. This particular picture on the monitor is from a selfie I took this last winter out in Utah, sitting on the ski area plaza with my favorite Betty Boop bandana on. There's a tongue twister, Betty Boop bandana. It was a beautiful day, a lot of sunshine. The colors were in full force. Uh, in this particular case, demonstrating a limited palette, the colors will not match up perfectly with those on the monitor, those of the actual selfie. Uh, Nonetheless, let's see how we get along here. One of the criteria when you're putting the brush to the canvas is the right shape on the right place of the canvas. there are 5 points that Richard Schmid um, is credited with saying, and in fact has written in his book. And we'll get into those criteria at another time, but for the moment, let's just say make sure the stroke you're putting down has is being placed in the correct position on the canvas and it's the right shape for that place on the canvas. It's just as simple as that. Um, if I were to add one more recommendation to that through Richard Schmid, it would be to watch your edges, where the edges should be soft, where paint blends into each other. It should blend into each other. Where there's a hard edge, it should be a hard edge. Uh, the values are really critical, especially in the end product. In the beginning, in the drawing stage, which is where we're at here, you can see that there's some blending of the shapes of the areas, but it's still putting the right shape in the right place and blending the edges where they should be blended. Okay, I think I've worked the painting to the point where there is some recognition of myself in the portrait. It's not Susie Chapstick, it's Tom Page someplace with a bandana on his head. And if you can see right now, I'm starting to lay in a little alizarin crimson that's been highly tinted. And because of the value, because of the color, it's tending to kind of pop and even give some flesh tone qualities to the portrait. And I'm just laying in the colors where I think they're going to be. I will go back and I will darken them. I will tint them, lighten them with white. I will blend them into the larger shapes until it starts to work for me. But again, this is a limited palette. We just have 4 colors working right now: burnt umber, alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, and a little bit of white to adjust the values. White will also cool down any color. But on a quick sketch like this, there's no reason to get a full portrait palette out, not even necessarily a double primary palette. A Zorn palette or a limited palette can be just enough to make the statement that you want to make. This is not a formal portrait. Not too many people have. Maybe Jesse Ventura has a formal portrait with a boa around his neck, but not too many people have formal portraits with bandanas around their neck. A painting is a work of art where you're constantly making corrections. It doesn't start out perfect, at least mine don't. And yet, if you stay the course, if you follow the protocol, the steps, uh, you have the confidence, in the end, you should get something that is representational of what you're trying to paint. You can see at this point, compared to where we first started, it's really come a long ways. It may not be a finished product. You could put another 10 hours into this, but for a real-time video. Here I spent about another, seriously, no more than 3 minutes just to saturate, darken some of the colors. And so let's say I have 18 minutes into this. And there you have it.